5 years into our marriage, I became pregnant, and Martin burst into tears of joy. Everyone said I was lucky, marrying into a wealthy family like Martin's, but no one ever mentioned the actress he kept on the side. It seemed like everyone had forgotten that I was the girl he confessed to. Eyes red. When he was 17, his friends, behind his back, asked him, "Aren't you afraid Charlotte will divorce you for being such a jerk?" Martin, completely unconcerned, chuckled lazily. "She won't." Later, without a fuss, I ended the pregnancy. When the news broke, Martin flew back from London overnight. Chapter 1. 6 weeks along. Do you want to keep it? The doctor asked this routinely, glancing down at the chart as he waited for my reply. Lowering my eyes, I gently placed a hand over my flat abdomen, my whole body shaking uncontrollably. I couldn't answer right away. I grabbed my bag from the side, thanked the doctor, and left. When a gift from fate arrives at the right time, it's a blessing, but at the wrong time, it becomes a burden. This child's arrival felt like a crack in time, stirring 12 years of love and resentment, hitting me hard along with the biting wind. Once, Martin had longed for this child. Now, it was nothing but a burden. Back then, we were young and had no notion of what life would bring. Only Martin, at 18, stood tall, his back straight, glowing in the sunlight breaking through the cracks. I looked up at him, asking, "What are you thinking about? So deep in thought?" He looked down, his thick lashes trembling. "My wish." "What wish?" He exaggeratedly gasped. "Charlotte, I've only got one wish my entire life. And you don't remember it?" "Impossible. No one has just one wish for their whole life." "Stop teasing me." Martin's lifetime wish at 18 didn't reveal itself to me until he was 22, in a rundown apartment filled with cold drafts. In front of a simple, cheap cake, he said softly, "Charlotte, you and I will grow old together, with a house full of children. Charlotte, someday we'll have a daughter. She'll look just like you, with big eyes and fair skin," waving her chubby little hands, calling me dad. A house full of children. I clutched the medical report, tears falling onto the paper. Instinctively, I picked up my phone to call Martin. Since our fallout 4 years ago, this was the first time I'd reached out to him. But in the next second, the call only rang twice before it was cut off. I froze, staring blankly at the screen. Just then, a notification popped up from a news app. Its headline dramatic and eye-catching: "Patricia spotted in gated community with wealthy boyfriend." Looking intimate, holding back the discomfort in my chest, I clicked into the article with trembling hands. Patricia wouldn't dare post anything about Martin on public platforms. If anything slipped through, he'd only appear subtly in the background. The media wouldn't risk showing Martin's full face either. In the photos, Patricia's face was clear, but the man was only shown from behind. No one knew Martin's silhouette better than I did. Even more telling was the hand in the photo, his left hand, where he still wore a ring on his fourth finger. Compared to his meticulously chosen, high-end attire, that ring seemed plain and cheap, barely worth noticing. Yet it was that very ring, simple and unremarkable, that I saved for half a year during my first job to buy. Even after our wedding, when Martin was a billionaire, owning countless companies, we still used those rings to declare our vows. "Martin, do you take Charlotte to be your wife, to cherish in poverty or wealth, in sickness or health, to be loyal and loving until death parts you?" "I do." Sitting on the cold metal chair outside the doctor's office, I let out a bitter laugh, unable to stop the overwhelming ache in my heart. How ridiculous I'd actually hesitated, if only for a moment, about keeping this unexpected child. I unlocked my phone and texted Martin, "Come home when you're free. I have something to talk about." Unexpectedly, he replied immediately, "I'm busy lately. Contact my secretary if it's urgent." Chapter 2. Over the years, Martin's business grew exponentially, with assets spread across countless ventures. We'd once lived in a basement, then a cramped apartment for $800 a month, and now we were in a mansion worth millions. Since that day, I hadn't seen Martin return home, but someone else showed up instead. It was a small private gathering with a few of Martin's friends. I had no idea how Patricia managed to get into the inner room. She intercepted me in the hallway, pausing briefly when she saw me, a smirk on her lips. Men are such dogs, no matter how beautiful the flower at home. They just can't resist picking wildflowers outside. It was her first time seeing me. Though I'd seen her before, she was a popular celebrity, her image plastered all over the city. Before I could respond, a voice from behind dripped with sarcasm. "You're pretty self-aware, knowing you're just the wildflower outside." Patricia's face darkened, realizing her careless words had backfired. Turning around, I saw it was Ethan, Martin's childhood friend and now his business partner. I gave Ethan a polite smile. This wasn't Patricia's first attempt at provoking me. 2 years ago, she'd called once. When I answered, she asked smugly, "Martin, will you divorce your wife and marry me?" I guess then she was trying to assert her position. Over the phone, I heard the sound of clothes rustling. In the next second, Martin's cold, irritated voice came through. "Patricia, act up one more time, and you can get lost. Martin, you." The call abruptly ended, and I sat there for a long time, stunned. 2 years ago, she only dared to make her moves in secret. Now, she was brazenly challenging me face to face. I couldn't think of any reason for her boldness other than that Martin must have given her some sort of promise, some confidence. But even so, I had no intention of exchanging words with her. I turned to leave. She blocked my way, raising her eyebrows. "Charlotte, you and Martin have been at odds for so long. The love between you is already gone. Why drag it out as a pair of resentful spouses? Why not let him go so true love can thrive?" I chuckled coldly, enunciating each word. "True love?" She crossed her arms arrogantly. "Yes, Martin and I are genuinely in love." In love. The person who isn't loved should step aside. "So, Charlotte, it's you who should bow out." I glared at her, dropping all pretense. "You know you're the mistress, and instead of feeling ashamed, you flaunt it. Martin and I are married. No matter what happens between us, even if we stay tangled in this mess forever, it's not up to you to interfere." Standing here, demanding I leave, "Who do you think you are?" She faltered, backing away slightly, her hand moving to her abdomen as she raised her voice. "Because I'm carrying his child." My gaze instinctively shifted to her stomach, and her words echoed in my mind, pounding relentlessly. "Pregnant? A child?" My vision swam, the world around me spinning. Seeing my reaction, she smirked, her eyebrows raised. "You've been married to him for so many years without a child. I'm carrying his first child. Do you think he'll marry me for the sake of our baby?" I suddenly laughed, finding the situation in front of me unbearably empty, drained of meaning. My body went limp, my hands and feet numb. Just then, Ethan reached out to steady me. "Are you all right?" I forced a smile. "Did you hear that? Martin's first child." Ethan pressed his lips together, saying nothing. At that moment, footsteps echoed behind Patricia. I looked up. It was Martin. After days of absence, his face was cold, dressed in a tailored suit under a black overcoat, his handsome features darkened by a furrowed brow. Martin's eyes fell on me, briefly shifting to where Ethan's hand steadied my shoulder. Patricia called out to him in excitement, but in the next second, Martin's expression turned icy as he grabbed her by the hair, his tone laced with menace. "Who told you to come near her? Are you trying to get yourself killed?" Patricia screamed, crying out, "Martin, I didn't mean to. I'm carrying your child. Don't you care about your own baby at all?" Martin's gaze turned even darker as he scoffed. "You sure it's mine?" He released her with a harsh shove. "Get out." Patricia held her head, too afraid to look at him, scrambling to leave. When she was gone, the empty corridor was left to the three of us, silence stretching between us. Martin tilted his head, looking at Ethan. "Ethan, you like Charlotte?" Ethan's face turned red, stammering, What are you talking about?" Martin ignored his protest, his dark gaze fixed on me as he spoke to Ethan. "Even if you did, it doesn't matter. Charlotte is my wife. She's only ever going to be with me." With that, Martin turned and walked away. I looked down at the message Ethan had sent me. "That jerk only has such confidence because he knows you love him." Ethan was a notorious playboy. with no plans to settle down. As he once explained, he valued his freedom too much to be tied down. Even someone like Ethan thinks you're a jerk. So, Martin, how can you be so sure that I'll love you forever? Chapter 3. In our youth, who would have thought that all-consuming love could turn into contempt, sharp words, and bitter silences? 17-year-old Martin had it all: intelligence, family wealth, good looks, a kind heart. He was the brightest presence at Huan High. Back then, I didn't understand why. In a crowd full of excitement, I only saw him. Later, I realized that when someone becomes your whole world, your gaze has nowhere else to go. And young Charlotte was just as passionate and bold. No one would have believed that Martin could like me. But through countless springs and summers, he stayed by my side. He never shied away, never feared the teacher's reprimands, openly declaring his intentions. So what if I like Charlotte? What does it have to do with her? Punish me if you want. But she knows nothing. Early romance? No. This is just a one-sided crush. I'm still trying to win her over. I remember how happy I felt, barely suppressing a smile as I looked up at him, tugging discreetly on his sleeve. Martin, take it easy and focus on studying. Dressed in his black jacket, he leaned lazily, his bangs falling over his narrow eyes, one eyebrow lifted. Can't do that. Ethan told me there are a bunch of guys at school with their eyes on you. I have to make them back off. How brazen he was. Standing at the front of the class, casually holding a piece of chalk, he solved a complex math problem as though it were nothing. As he explained, the class burst into cheers. Martin turned his head to look at me, a small smile barely visible under the warm sunset filtering through the doorway. I raised my book to hide my face, my cheeks warm behind the pages filled with ink. Back then, the spring wind carried all the tenderness, tasting of a girl's plum-flavored secrets, brushing past the boy's white shirt. That school uniform, catching the breeze, wrapped around an entire era of youth. At the time, everyone envied us, saying we were perfect for each other and would last forever. The year we took our college entrance exams, we both got into the same university, though in different programs. The first time Martin waited for me after class, my roommate, Roma, excitedly shook my arm. Charlotte, there's a super handsome guy outside looking for you. I heard he's from the computer science department. His name's Martin. I glanced out the window and saw Martin leaning against the railing, standing out like a crane among chickens in the bustling crowd. I smiled to myself, silently saying, I know him, Martin. In college, he spoiled me until I was hopelessly pampered. If I mentioned a craving late at night, he'd be waiting with it, warm, at my dorm door the next morning. In those days, we were like countless other couples, clingy, passionate. As he leaned in for a kiss, I'd pout and say, you keep distracting me. I can't study properly. If I fail this semester, don't expect to see me. Martin would laugh softly. I'm sorry. How about we go to the library? You study, and I'll keep quiet. In those days, our friend Roma described us as an immature couple, though secretly envied. Chapter 4. In our third year of college, Martin's father passed away, exposing a business riddled with debt, and his mother, unable to bear the pressure from creditors, took her own life. Overnight, Martin, once the golden child, was brought to his knees. For nearly a month, I didn't see him. Then one day, he finally emerged, looking haggard, shoulders slumped. The first thing he said was, you should go. I won't drag you down with me. I clenched my teeth, glaring at him. What do you think I like about you? Is it your money or your family background? Martin, you jerk. Tears rolled down my cheeks, one after another, impossible to wipe away. He stepped forward, bending down to gently wipe them away. Don't cry, Charlotte. I can't bear to let you go. But how could I ask you to stay by my side like this? Back then, Martin was all alone. No parents to look back on. No light guiding his future. Yet no matter what, his wish never changed. Martin still wanted to grow old with Charlotte, surrounded by children and grandchildren. When he first started his business, he struggled to secure funding. I secretly used the dowry my mother had saved for me to help him. When he found out where the money had come from, he rested his head on my shoulder, pressing a hand to the back of my neck, preventing me from looking back at him. Foolish girl, no matter how down I am, I'm not using your money. Keep it safe. One day, it'll be used where it's meant to be. Later, when his business finally began to improve, he faced a harsh investor. Each glass of white wine was $100,000. That night, he secured $2 million in investment, but ended up with a perforated stomach and was rushed to the hospital. During those times, he often worked late into the night. Sometimes, when his stomach ached from exhaustion, he'd come into the bedroom, pressing his cold face into my hand, softly, almost childishly, calling, "Charlotte." I was a heavy sleeper, but I'd always wake up the moment he called my name. When he was utterly worn out, he'd rest his head against my chest, eyes closed, taking a brief respite. Back then, I'd gently rub his stomach, patting the back of his head, running my hand over the short, dark hair I loved. He'd say, "Charlotte, you'll never regret being with me." Later, atop a snowy mountain, the fierce winds became his orchestra. At St. Nep Bay, the vast waves served as my veil. Martin's proposal made headlines, and countless people scoured the internet to unearth every detail. "Charlotte, will you marry me?" How did I respond? I remember now. My eyes filled with him, my hand over my mouth, happiness spilling from my gaze. Logic collapsed, and devotion turned into a fervent fever. My answer was earnest and reverent. "I will. Martin, I love you so much." Chapter 5. I'd often ask myself, do I regret my choice? Even with an ending like this, I think I don't regret having loved. Those 12 years may have left a reckless mark on my youth, but it was the bravest chapter of my life. Fate may be cruel, but it is also kind. Kind in the sense that, as long as you keep moving forward, it will always provide you a path. I never sought out Patricia, yet Martin had elevated her to such heights that she seemed to permeate my life, her face popping up everywhere I looked. As I scrolled through my contacts to find my obstetrician, Patricia's updates flooded my screen. One was a selfie in a theater, another a glittering mansion adorned with rows of jewelry and unopened designer bags. The caption read, "Apology accepted. Princess forgives you." It was clear someone had rented out the theater for her. The jewelry and bags? They were worth at least $20 million. I turned off my phone without a hint of emotion. My heart was hollow. Nothing stirred anymore. Just then, I heard a sound at the entrance. I looked up. Martin was standing there, draping his coat over his arm as he bent to take off his shoes. Sensing my gaze, he looked up, his expression light as if he were returning home after a day's work. Greeting his wife warmly. "Still awake?" His tone was casual, as if he'd just finished a long day and was checking in with me. I looked up at him and smiled. "Did you go to the movies with Patricia?" His movements froze. He looked at me in surprise, as if shocked I'd ask such a question. I suppose it made sense. This was the first time I'd brought up Patricia in front of us both. After a brief pause, he picked up a cigarette from the table, lighting it with a flash of his silver lighter. Leaning back against the couch, he exhaled, the red glow of the cigarette lighting his tired eyes. He squinted slightly, asking, "Do you care?" I glanced at the cigarette in his hand, instinctively placing my own hand over my abdomen before slowly lowering it. "When I cared, did you?" I asked, almost amused. He should know, I was referring to what had happened 4 years ago, the beginning of our fractured marriage. Back then, Patricia was a nobody, barely in her teens, bright and pretty. It was a beautiful age. She'd look at him with wide, watery eyes, calling him Mr. Fu. I was so confident back then, confident enough to believe that as long as Martin stayed true, no one else would pose a threat. But in the end, I overestimated Martin's love for me and underestimated my own possessiveness. He would absent-mindedly call her interesting, letting her get closer. She would send him nightly goodnights on WeChat. And I, too invested, lost all sense of reason, but he couldn't even be bothered to argue with me. I was the only one playing out a tragedy. He merely frowned, impatiently saying, "What can I do if she misunderstood?" I stood there, barefoot, eyes red with rage. "You brought this on yourself." If you hadn't led her on, how could she misunderstand? If you didn't give her hope, why would she try to kill herself for you? If Martin had felt nothing for her, where did she get the confidence to challenge me? He looked at me, his voice flat and cold. Charlotte, you're acting like a madwoman. In that moment, it was as if we had transformed from lovers into bitter enemies. I pulled myself out of that memory, breaking the long silence that filled the empty living room. My voice was steady. Martin, let's get a divorce. At that moment, his cigarette burned down to the filter. He didn't release it in time and winced as he burned his fingers, hastily extinguishing it. Only then did he look up at me. Chapter 6. With just one glance, Martin lowered his head, as if he couldn't bear to look at me any longer. He clenched the cigarette pack tightly, the sound of crumpling filling the silence. In that pause, who knows what thoughts raced through his mind. After a long moment, he spoke, his voice halting. Is this because of Patricia? He hesitated, then continued slowly. If you say you mind, I can make her disappear. When did the once pure and straightforward Martin become so ruthless and self-serving? I looked at him. She's still carrying your child. That's not my child, he replied, a mocking smile tugging at his lips. Do you believe everything she says? Just because she claims it's mine. It's mine? My child could only be Martin. I interrupted calmly. I don't care anymore. I truly don't. So, there's no need to explain. All I want is for you to agree to the divorce. Under the harsh light, Martin's face was as pale as paper. A bitter smile crossed his face. Of course. You wouldn't care. You, Charlotte, are now as cold as still water. Even if I died in front of you, you wouldn't bat an eye. So why would you care about anything? I no longer had the desire to argue, looking at him as one might look at a spoiled child. I stood up and spoke calmly. I hope you'll give me an answer about the divorce by tomorrow. Behind me, his voice sounded rough and hoarse. What if I refuse? What if I won't let you go? Charlotte? I paused at the top of the stairs, my hand resting on the banister as I looked back at him. The man I had loved in my youth and the one before me now seemed to merge, and sorrow filled my heart. Martin, these years with you have made me so unhappy. That unhappiness has slowly drained my life away. I let the tears fall, telling him each word clearly. Sometimes, when I fall asleep at night, I wonder if I'll even wake up the next day. We should have divorced 4 years ago. The only reason I stayed was out of sheer defiance. I kept asking myself why I should step aside for another woman. Martin sat as still as a statue, his head bowed low, hidden in the shadows, silent. Chapter 7. The next morning, Martin was gone. I looked around the empty mansion, realizing he was avoiding me. Even now, I didn't understand what he was holding on to, but after making up my mind to divorce him, I actually felt a strange sense of peace. The oppressive weight that had suffocated me for years seemed to vanish. 3 days later, there was a charity gala for the Fu group. Until the divorce was finalized, I was still expected to attend as Mrs. Fu. On the night of the event, Martin was nowhere to be found. No one could control him. Surprisingly, however, I spotted a familiar face among the guests. Hesitant, I called out, "Mario?" A man in a sharp suit stood under the lights, his posture cool and aloof, his gaze indifferent as he looked at the floor. But when he turned around, his face softened for a brief moment. After a slight hesitation, he walked over, offering a polite smile. "Charlotte." I hadn't expected to see him here. I had personally sent out the invitations, and I remembered sending one to him. What surprised me was that he actually came. Mario was famously low-key. Even with his numerous awards and celebrated performances, he was so detached from the entertainment industry that his fans believed acting might only be his side gig. Once, an opposing agency tried digging up dirt on him for 3 whole months, only to uncover his flawless academic record and good behavior. Ironically, their effort only boosted his reputation. I thought Mario might have come tonight out of respect for Martin, his college roommate of 4 years. Back in university, Martin would sometimes bring me along to their dorm dinners, and over time, I got to know Mario. I still remember the first time Martin introduced me to Mario at one of those gatherings. Both of us had a flash of recognition because we had already bumped into each other twice before. but to avoid any misunderstandings, I stood behind Martin and winked at Mario, and he played along perfectly. There was a rumor at S University about two mountains, a volcano and an iceberg in the computer science department. Martin, with his sunny warmth, was the volcano, while Mario, cool and reserved, was the iceberg. The two were evenly matched in both intelligence and background, often compared by outsiders, but those close to them knew they were more than just friends. They were confidants. It was a shock when Mario, who seemed destined for an academic path, dived headfirst into acting after graduation. After college, apart from seeing him on screen, I hadn't seen him in person until now. I looked up at him, smiling. "How have you been these years?" Mario's eyes had a certain sparkle, a starlit quality to them. He nodded. "I've been well." The silence between us felt oddly heavy, so I started to say goodbye. But he spoke first, his voice quiet, almost sorrowful. "These years, you haven't been happy." It wasn't a question, it was a statement, an intrusive, even presumptuous, observation. But his expression was sincere. He was part of that world. He undoubtedly knew about Patricia. I suddenly remembered the storm he'd caused online 2 years ago. Mario, usually indifferent, ignored any negative press or attempts to ride his coattails, except for the time Patricia tried to link herself to him. He personally posted a rebuttal on Weibo. It was almost surreal, seeing someone so aloof lash out with such biting words. Remembering this, I smiled at him. True, but soon I'll be free of it all. Mario tilted his head, looking at me with a questioning gaze but refraining from asking more. Instead, he offered a quiet smile. "Congratulations." My smile broadened, genuine and heartfelt. Everyone who'd heard about my divorce had tried to persuade me otherwise, shaking their heads at what they called my foolishness. They all had the same reasoning, insisting I should stay in this broken marriage and hold on to my title as Mrs. Fu. They'd tell me, "Martin just has a mistress. It doesn't mean he doesn't love you." Or, "Men are all like this. As long as he still comes home, what's the big deal?" This was the first time someone said, "Congratulations." I raised my glass, cheerfully clinking it against Mario's. Just then, a hand settled firmly around my waist. For a moment, my whole body tensed, and even the hand holding my glass froze. Martin pulled me into his embrace in a display of intimacy. I looked up, meeting his dark, emotionless eyes. "Long time no see, Martin." Mario glanced at me before extending his hand to Martin with polite detachment. Martin shifted his gaze from me to Mario, a lazy smile playing on his lips. "It has been a while. I'll make sure someone takes good care of you. Charlotte and I have things to discuss, but we should get together sometime soon." Hearing this, I shot Martin a sidelong glance, noticing his tense jaw and wondering what he was thinking. With nothing left to say, I nodded at Mario and left first. Unbeknownst to me, Mario called after Martin as I walked away. He asked, "Back then, you treasured her so much. I thought you'd treat her well forever." Martin stood there, his face icy, a flash of anger in his gaze, as if he wanted to devour the man before him. After a long pause, he smirked, his voice nonchalant. "What does that have to do with you?" Martin himself couldn't understand his own fear. He'd known since college that Mario's type wasn't like Charlotte. Without waiting for Mario's reply, he tossed out a cold warning. "Mario, stay away from Charlotte." Chapter 8. After that night's gala, Martin seemed to vanish again. I never imagined that the next time I'd see him would be under such circumstances. On the evening of September 12th, there was a hostage situation at the Baihua Trade Building, and I was one of the hostages with a knife pressed against my neck. The scene was utter chaos, people running for their lives, some calling the police, but everyone heading for the exits. But I couldn't afford to panic. I forced my trembling body to stay upright, though I couldn't stop myself from feeling afraid. The attacker screamed wildly, "Don't come near, or I'll kill her. Get the police here. I want to talk to the police." Before the police arrived, Martin did. He must have run from somewhere nearby, his hair disheveled, and when he saw me, his face went ghostly pale. Martin took a few steps forward, angering the attacker, who shouted, "Don't come any closer." He steadied himself, trying to suppress his anxiety, and spoke in a calm voice, I won't come closer. Do you want money? Let her go. I'll give you however much you want. The police won't pursue you, and I can protect you. The attacker yelled back. I don't want money. I want justice. I want to talk to the police. Martin placed everything he had on the ground, showing his phone to the attacker. All right, I'll exchange myself for her. I'm the chairman of Fu Group. Taking me will get you more leverage. I can mediate with the police for you. I widened my eyes, struggling to speak. Don't, he has a bomb. Martin continued talking. He was always good with words, persuasive, and in the assailant's adrenaline-fueled state. He agreed to the exchange. As Martin walked over, the attacker drew a second knife and stabbed him in the arm to weaken him, then held it to his throat, shoving me aside. Martin looked at me one last time, bending over compliantly with the attacker. His voice was hoarse. Run. Don't look back. The police arrived soon after, and I clung to them, begging them to save him. They forcefully escorted me outside, and I knelt on the ground, my mind blank. Finally, as I collapsed to my knees, the doors swung open from the inside. There was no explosion, no lifeless Martin. I supported myself on the steps, tears streaming down my face as I watched him walk out. Clutching his arm, he approached and lifted me into his arms, burying my head in his chest. I sobbed uncontrollably, my heart full of fear and confusion as I whispered, Martin, I'm here, he replied softly, his head bowed. I choked out, you're not even afraid of dying. So why? I couldn't finish, and Martin stayed silent, not pressing further, because we both knew what I hadn't said. If you're not afraid of death, then why don't you have the courage to love only one person? Martin, is it really so hard to love just one person for a lifetime? After a long silence, he held me close, his voice trembling as he pleaded, Charlotte, let's make it work this time, please. Chapter 9. While the hostage situation was making headlines, Martin went abroad on a business trip. The day before my appointment at the obstetrician, I sat alone in the bedroom from dawn until dusk. Even with all my resolve, I couldn't help but imagine what this child would have been like. Would they have been restless or calm? I placed my hand gently over my stomach, tears falling as I whispered an apology. I'm so sorry for meeting you under such unfavorable circumstances. I'm so sorry I can't bring you into this world. At the hospital, I unexpectedly ran into Patricia. I learned that she had recently been plagued by scandals online, her career practically destroyed. As her victim, I couldn't deny a certain satisfaction, though I didn't care to taunt her. Just as I turned to go inside, Patricia spotted me and charged forward. I didn't have time to react before my bodyguard seized her. She glared at me with a vicious expression. You told Martin to get rid of my child, didn't you? Charlotte, you bitch. I stared at her in disbelief, a lump forming in my throat. Patricia struggled, her expression shifting from hatred to desperation, her eyes reddening. You're divorcing him, aren't you? After you're gone, someone will have to be Mrs. Fu. I've been with him for years. Her voice broke as she continued. Charlotte, I admit I went after him for money at first. I tried everything to get him to invest in me. But now, I really love him. I want to marry him, to spend my life with him. Patricia, I interrupted, my voice calm but harsh. Do yourself a favor next time and don't be the mistress in someone else's marriage. It never ends well. I turned away, letting her voice fade behind me. Charlotte, please talk to Martin for me. Tell him not to abandon me. After that scene, I felt emotionally drained. I stood at the doctor's door for a long time, looking up at the sunlight filtering in, straightening my spine as I walked resolutely inside. As that tiny life slowly left my body, my tears seemed to dry up as well. It was as if I was mourning one last time for those 12 bittersweet years. The day after I returned from the hospital, Martin flew back from London, exhausted and bloodshot. He confronted me. Why did you go to the obstetrician? I replied, I terminated the pregnancy. He lost control, smashing everything in sight, his hands trembling as he pointed at me. Charlotte, why? That was our child. He fell to his knees, covering his face, his head resting on my lap, shoulders shaking uncontrollably. Charlotte, That was our child. I looked at him, feeling no satisfaction, only a deep, unending sadness. This child had only been conceived because of a moment of softness. It had been a mistake from the start. I sighed. Martin, let's get a divorce. I won't agree to it. Or do you want me to die slowly by your side? Martin's eyes widened at my words, and he stood there, a look of helplessness in his gaze. Chapter 10. Martin stayed locked in his room the entire day. Only at sunset did he finally open the door. He looked at me, his voice steady. Charlotte, I'll agree to it. Dragging this out with lawsuits and court battles was the last thing I wanted. I didn't want to make things ugly. His calm agreement brought a quiet relief. The divorce proceedings were swift, finalized within 3 days. During those 3 days, Martin seemed to transform back into his old self, managing everything with a relaxed smile, chatting with me nonchalantly. On the day I moved out, I crouched to pack my things while Martin sat silently on the couch, watching me. After a while, he finally spoke. You own 3% of the original shares in all my companies. Do whatever you want with them. The houses on Hungshan Road and the villa by West Hill Park are also in your name. He placed a bank card on the table. There's 300 million in this account. Take it. This was the first I'd heard about the shares, but I couldn't be bothered to ask further. Martin was giving me enough to live comfortably for several lifetimes. I wasn't proud enough to refuse. So, I accepted the card and everything he offered. Thank you. Leaning back on the couch, he watched me, his eyes the only part of him that seemed alive, following my every move. After about 10 minutes, he suddenly spoke again. Charlotte, it's late. Stay one more night. I'll take you in the morning. I looked at him, smiled, and shook my head. No need. My mother's coming to pick me up. He stood up abruptly. Your mom's here? I'll go get her. Grabbing his coat, he moved toward the door. I stopped him. Martin, don't. He looked back at me, confused. My mom used to praise you every time she saw me, I said, recalling her words about how caring he was. She really did like you, but you hurt her daughter. I don't think she'd want to see you now. His fingers tightened around his coat until they turned white. He stepped back, collapsing back onto the couch. At the elevator, I called out to him one last time. Martin. He lifted his head, smiling as he looked at me. I thought our divorce would be loud, messy, the talk of the town. I never expected us to end it with such dignity. I smiled back. I'm leaving. He wanted to walk me out, but I stopped him. That door became our dividing line, separating our worlds. He looked down at the threshold, blinking. If you ever need help, just call me. As long as I can, I'll be there for you. I turned, waved, and walked away without another word. Chapter 11. After the divorce, I logged into my long-neglected Weibo account and posted a new drawing. In no time, fans flooded the comments. Am I seeing this right? Is this by Charlotte? Yep, it's her. I never thought I'd live to see Charlotte return to her old, sweet style again. If you know Charlotte's recent dark-themed art. If I weren't a die-hard fan, I would have stopped following ages ago. Thinking back on the darkness in both my art and marriage these past few years, I couldn't help but feel that the divorce was undoubtedly the right choice. As I scrolled down, I saw a familiar username, beautiful work. I hope you find happiness every day. This was an old fan of mine. I remembered that he had followed me since my sophomore year when I posted my first piece. Since then, he had quietly liked every one of my posts, leaving comments of encouragement, even on my more heavily criticized works. I smiled and replied, thank you. Oddly enough, in the days that followed, the person I kept running into was Mario. Once, he was walking a dog, and I stared for a moment before asking, is that the dog? In my sophomore year, Martin and I had found an abandoned puppy off campus and taken it for a checkup, but neither of us was patient enough to care for it, especially with me busy drawing manga. Mario had offered to handle the situation, and I thought he'd find the puppy a new home, but he ended up raising it. He smiled, a faint dimple appearing. Yes, it's old now, so I don't take it out often. Surprised, I knelt down to pet it, realizing how affectionate it was. You've taken good care of it. It even has pups. He paused, glancing at me. If you'd like, you could meet them too. It would make them happy. I nodded without thinking. Sure, maybe sometime. I didn't intend to actually meet the puppies, it felt too personal and inappropriate. But the next day, Mario brought them over. The pups wagged their tails and were so affectionate that it was impossible to resist. Only later did I learn that Mario's dogs, like him, were usually aloof and didn't let just anyone touch them. In the adult world, reading someone's emotions is easy, especially since Mario didn't bother to hide his. Eventually, I told him, Mario, I'm not ready for a new relationship. I'm enjoying life as it is. And, to be honest, I have a fear of marriage. He smiled softly. Charlotte, don't be afraid. I didn't tell you I like you to get a response or to be with you. I just wanted you to know that, no matter what, there's someone who's always been drawn to you, who admires you, and that won't change. Sometimes I wonder how Mario manages to blend gentleness and aloofness so seamlessly. Epilogue. 2 years later, Mario's studio announced his marriage, and the news blew up online. Fans and reporters soon pieced together clues that his bride was none other than the ex-wife of the Foo Group's chairman. Some furious fans flooded Mario's social media, calling him a replacement groom and disparaging Charlotte for her past. A few even took their anger to Foo Group's official page, forcing them to shut down the comments section. Capitalizing on the drama, business reporters asked Martin for his thoughts. Martin stared at the camera, pausing for a long time before he said, "Congratulations." Mario held a press conference, addressing the public sincerely. If it weren't for her, I probably would never have married. So, I hope you'll be happy for me. To be granted a wedding in this lifetime, it feels like a gift from fate. After that, the internet quieted down. In his career, Mario had ignored everything the entertainment world threw at him. The only 2 times he had openly stirred up controversy were both because of Charlotte. After the silence, some fans unearthed Mario's secret Weibo account, where he had posted on the day of his debut, "If I stand high enough, will she notice me?" The revelation sparked an online frenzy, with fans and writers creating fanfiction about the love triangle between Mario, Charlotte, and Martin. Charlotte looked down at her phone, reading the fans' detailed detective work before opening a familiar user profile. She then padded barefoot to the kitchen, phone in hand. Mario, in a light gray sweater, was bent over, cutting fruit for her. Tentatively, she called out, "Charlotte's little fan?" He murmured, still focused on the fruit. Then he froze, glancing back at her. Mario quickly turned away, muttering, "I don't know what you're talking about. Go put on some slippers." Charlotte looked at her phone, at the username Charlotte's Little Fan, and then back at Mario, laughing so hard she clutched her forehead. Amid her exaggerated laughter, Mario couldn't help but laugh along. Their wedding became the talk of the town. On the wedding day, Ethan rushed from the airport, arriving at the venue just in time. He ran into an old friend at the entrance. Checking the time, Ethan realized he wasn't late and approached, patting Martin on the shoulder. "Not going in to see?" Martin weighed the cigarette in his hand, glancing at the grand venue bustling with guests and celebrations. He handed Ethan a small box. "It's a wedding gift. Take it in for me, will you?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Martin, coughing from the smoke, laughed until his eyes watered. "Afraid she won't accept it," he added. "Don't tell her it's from me." Ethan asked again, "Sure you're not going in?" What would he watch? Their vows of eternal love? Their happiness? He could never truly accept that someone he cherished so deeply, someone he'd spent all his energy embracing, was now in another's arms. Ethan patted his shoulder. "I'll go grab a drink." Perhaps not having possessed her made it easier for him to let go. It made the pain less consuming. Ethan watched as Martin blended into the crowd, his figure bleak and solitary. He had a gut feeling that Martin might never move on. This was only the beginning. Martin sat in his car, gazing up at the building. He never imagined that Mario's feelings had been hidden all these years. When he found out, he'd wanted to kill him. Martin lowered his head and chuckled, the laughter reverberating through his chest. He'd never tell Charlotte that her favorite birthday gift, the manga collection she cherished so much, had originally been meant for her from him, but Mario had given it on his behalf. And when she left, she hadn't taken it with her. It remained, gathering dust in the villa. He'd also never tell her that, when online rumors smeared her name, he hadn't even had time to respond before Mario single-handedly handled it all. At the time, Martin had clapped him on the shoulder, calling him a good friend. Mario had said nothing. Martin always thought Mario's actions were for his sake. Thinking back now, every word felt like a knife lodged in his chest. These secrets, he would take with him to the grave, selfishly denying them any chance of deeper love. The car drifted into the dark, and Martin grew further from the joy and celebration behind him.